It sounds pretty crazy. Something will happen to Earth eventually.
Edward Robinson, an Australian entrepreneur and founder of Robinson Aerospace Systems,
I wanted to do something that was the pinnacle of engineering.
turned a childhood fascination into a mission that's shaping the future.
We make satellites for education. So we work with school students, and then they do a bunch of experiments in the classroom, and eventually some actually launch those satellites to space.
But the journey was far from easy.
I had 2 test launches, both of them failed. The first one literally caught fire on the launch pad. It couldn't have gone worse.
With setbacks mounting and money running out, Edward had to find work at a young age to fund his dream.
If you want a job at a young age, you either go to Macca's or KFC. Both of them rejected me.
Despite these challenges, Edward refused to give up on his dream.
The only way that I can make money to fund these projects is to start a business. Well, I was buying bulk electronic parts, storing it in my bedroom and selling it on eBay for a profit. I was doing $10,000 a month. So that funded everything.
What do you think the future is of space travel?
The goal right now for most companies, SpaceX, NASA, is the moon. That is so that people can learn how to live. So if something happens to Earth, it doesn't just delete life as we know it.
So you put shit into space.
Yep.
What got you into that? Like, I mean, every little kid goes, oh, I was going to say every little kid, it's probably incorrect, but there's a lot of little kids who look up at the stars and they go, I want to be an astronaut or I want to go and put stuff into space. What made you do it?
Well, I think that you're right, that most kids do love space, whether it's like their main obsession or not. I think most kids are interested in space to some extent. For me, it was more about the engineering and the challenge. I wanted to do something that was, the pinnacle of engineering, which space is. It's really the most difficult engineering that you can think of. So for me, it was really about the challenge of it and trying to kind of push myself and in a way prove to myself that I was able to do that. That all started kind of like way back when I was in year 10. I don't know how long you got for this story, but it's a long story.
Please, we have hours.
Right.
Seriously, tell us the story.
Yeah, so it all started back in year 10. I was always kind of interested in engineering.
I mean, in year 10, the only thing I was interested in was chicks and going out and getting drunk.
Yeah. Well, look, I was a nerd, right? Okay. So, no, I loved engineering. I loved, from a younger age, I loved Lego and stuff like that. And that progressed to electronics and software and all that. And when I was in year 10, I was literally just scrolling through Instagram and I saw a video come up of a SpaceX rocket landing on a ship in the ocean after going to space. Have you seen those?
Yeah.
Yeah, you have? Yeah. So these rockets, they're like the height of a 21-story building, right? Like absolutely enormous. And they've put a satellite in orbit, which is 28,000 k's an hour.
Or a Tesla.
Yeah, or a Tesla on one of the first launches, yeah. They've come back and it's landed on a ship in the ocean. And when I first saw that, I was like, nah, CGI, can't do that. It's impossible. Of course, AI didn't exist back then, so I couldn't accuse it of being AI. But no, I found out it was real. I was like, damn, this company, SpaceX, and this Elon guy is actually doing this stuff. This is real. So for me, there was a very instantaneous moment of like, I want to work on stuff that goes to space. Rockets, satellites, I don't care. I just want to be involved with this stuff that's going to space because to me, it's just the coolest thing that you could possibly think of doing. So that kind of started that passion. And then from there, it was, well, I'm in school, so it's like, I can either finish school and then maybe do a 4-year engineering degree and then maybe land an entry-level job at a space company. And there's very few in SA or Australia, so maybe land that job, climb my way up to eventually work on the cool stuff. That's like at least 10 years by the time you do all of that. And for someone who was as passionate as I was, waiting 10 years just wasn't an option. I was like, I want to do this stuff now. So I started building model rockets initially, made some pretty crazy model rockets that had like electronics and software and stuff in them to try and control them. Eventually that graduated to making satellite prototypes, which eventually formed the foundation for the company I'm working on now, Robinson Aerospace Systems, and eventually led to the opportunity to actually build the satellite to go to space.
That's wild. So you remember the exact moment that you just saw Elon land shit on the pontoon or the barge or whatever he was doing in the middle of the ocean. You were just like, that's the thing that I'm here to do.
Yeah. It was an overnight obsession. Like I literally saw that and straight away, like all these kind of different passions I had just came together and was like, that's what I'm going to do. That's the thing.
I was lost and confused, and I was 21, and it was the middle of the night, and I couldn't sleep. And this guy came on TV telling me that like you can change your life. And at that point in time, like I'd hit rock bottom, and I was like, fuck it, something's got to change. And so I got up at 1 o'clock in the morning, called the number, and ended up getting this audio product and started listening to it. And about 4 or 5 years later, this friend rang and said, hey, I'm going to this personal development event. You should come with me. And when I saw the dude on stage, I was like, I know what I'm here to do. Yep. It's cool when you get that moment where you just like, bang, I know what I need to do. Yep. It's awesome.
And for a lot of people, that doesn't happen, you know. I always recommend it to people that like, you know, most people don't have that moment of that's what I want to do. Like for most people, it's just go and start trying things. Try a lot of things. Just figure out what it is that you want to do. Figure out what it is that you're passionate about, and then just take that to the highest possible level. You know, it's the best thing you can do in life, in my opinion, at least.
What's your theory of why people don't do that though?
Theory of why?
Yeah, I mean, you're an engineer, so you think through things like
hitting the big questions. Exactly. I'm very analytical of how I think, right? I think very kind of logically about things. But you know, for a lot of people, that there's a lot of different ways to go through life. You know, for me, the school that I went to was I was fortunate to go to a private school in the Barossa Valley. So everything was really based around like you have two options after school. You're either going to go to university and study engineering or science or something, or you're going to take over your parents' winery. That was the only options, right?
See, mine was get a trade.
Yeah.
Uni or trade.
Yeah. And trades are a big deal in SA right now with the shipyard and stuff like that. So that's no problem. But for me, I kind of always thought like, you know, just because everyone's going through life in one of these ways, or at least everyone around me, doesn't mean that that's what I have to do. You know, it's like I can really do anything that I want to do. And that's why as soon as school finished, I kind of felt this like sense of freedom very quickly. I was like, well, you know, there's a lot of pressure to go to uni and whatever, but like, I don't have to do whatever I want. You know, like it's my life now. I'm out of school, got complete freedom. So I did start uni, and I'm back at uni now actually. But it was during the first semester of uni that I had the idea for the company. And at the time, it was like, there's no risk to starting a company at that age. I was 18 at the time, you know, so I've got no mortgage, I've got no family support. So financially, there's no risk of starting a company. As for the career, it's like if the company fails, well, set my career back a few years, but oh well, you know, so like there was no risk.
How did you get the courage though? Because most people, I operate very similar, but that has come from probably a decade of just backing myself and failing and backing myself and failing and just after a while that like I'm a piece of shit because I failed just goes out of your head and you're like, I failed, but like whatever, I failed so much it doesn't matter anymore, and it just like it numbs itself. Most people don't have that. Mm-hmm. They haven't failed enough, or they don't have, I guess, the courage or the clarity that you had. Where did that come from? Like, did your parents instill that in you, or was it just that because you're so logical, it just doesn't make sense to think through it any other way?
It's just a mindset thing. As you said with failure, it's just, you know, you can either be scared to fail and be scared of what you're going to think of yourself or others are going to think or whatever. You can either be scared of that, or you can understand that you just need to embrace failure and kind of just fail over and over until you get it right. You know, if you fail enough times, you're going to figure it out at the end of the day. So for me, you know, going back to that kind of engineering mindset, a lot of engineering is failure. Now, if you're building a bridge, it has to work, right? But a lot of engineering, particularly when I do like electronics and stuff, it's prototyping. And prototyping is just failing over and over until it works. So it's like, you know, you build a circuit board, you test it, shit, doesn't work. You figure out why. Then you build another one, you test it again. Still doesn't work. You do that 5 times, it's bound to work eventually. So for me, it was just a mindset around, you know, just embracing failure, understanding that that's part of the process in trying to get to wherever you want to be or become whoever you want to be. It's you know, as I said at the start, you can either embrace failure or be scared of it. And I just think that if you're scared of it, then, you know, you're not going to achieve your full potential or pursue your passions to the furthest length that you possibly can.
Do you attach your emotions to getting stuff done? Because what I'm hearing, as someone who breaks down human behavior for a living and interviewing and working with a lot of highly successful, highly intelligent people, but also a lot of people who have that just absolute sheer grit of like, no matter how much I'm kicked against the wall, like I'll keep going until I win, which is a lot of entrepreneurship, right? It seems like you see failure as a process, right? Because I'm interested to know, like when I speak to a large amount of people in an audience and I talk about failure, to me, failure doesn't mean anything. Like I'm not emotionally attached to it. It's just like you just learn shit. But when I was younger, failure means you're a loser, you're a piece of shit, you're not going to get anywhere. Because at school, when you get things wrong, the kids pick on you or the teacher tells you that you're a failure or you're not going to get anywhere. I mean, my Latin teacher told me I wouldn't get anywhere with my attitude. So, you know, being all things Latin teacher, you know. But anyway, a lot of people have that link of like some emotion to failing.
Yep.
Do you have that? And if you do, how do you work through it? And if you don't, how did that come about?
I don't have that. You know, as soon as I got into engineering, that kind of became who I was. You know, I was just this kid obsessed with engineering, and as soon as I started doing that, I just kind of understood that was part of it. You know, it's like the model rocket that I mentioned earlier. That was, you know, within my high school, like everyone knew what I was doing. Everyone knew I was making this rocket, and I had 2 test launches. Both of them failed. The first one literally caught fire on the launch pad. Like couldn't have gone worse. And the second one went up and did a spiral in the sky and then crash landed into the ocean, into the oval. So 2 failures, but you know, I didn't care if anyone thought like, oh, haha, he made a rocket that didn't work. It's like, you know, well, you're not doing anything. You know, you're just kicking a footy on an oval. It's like, I don't really care what you think. You know, it's yeah, I don't know how to describe it, but there's no emotion attached to it. It's just, yeah, I understand that it's part of the process and it's just how things go. So
what does failure mean to you? When I use the term failure, and when you use it, what does it mean?
Deep question.
What's the definition?
I guess there is 2 forms of failure, right? There's failure as in the process, which is like understanding that you have to make mistakes to learn, and that's really the only way to learn. And then there's failure as in like your company's gone bankrupt and you have nothing left. That's the one that I'm scared of. All right. So yeah, the process, I adopt that very heavily. The thought of my company going bankrupt and losing people's money and, you know, spending years and years working on this business for it to result in nothing, that's the failure, the sort of failure that I'm truly scared of, which I think in a way, of course, drives me to work a lot harder. At the end of the day, if I wasn't scared of failing in that way, then I probably wouldn't work very hard. I'd sleep a lot better.
That's interesting because I used to have that same pattern, but once I got rid of that pattern of not fearing failure or bankruptcy or whatever, it actually set me free to be so much clearer in my thinking, so much better as a business owner and a better leader, because it just, like, my best mate went bankrupt in his business and the business that he has now is bigger than the one that he had previously. And it was a mistake that he made with investors and people had invested a large sum, a single person invested a large sum of capital, owned the majority shareholding. Him and my friend had a massive falling out and the shareholder said, fuck you, I want my money. And so just threw the company into liquidation to teach him a lesson.
To teach him a lesson.
Now they both lost money, but he sort of lost everything. But after that, he came back even bigger and stronger because he's more hungry to prove a point. But yeah, it's just interesting that you still, even though there's that part of you that's not afraid of failing, there's still that other part as well.
Exactly. Obviously, I talk to a lot of founders of, you know, various levels of what they're doing, and I get a lot of feedback around what the right mindset is around that. For me, I take investors' money particularly very serious. Like, to me, I don't want to lose people's money because the way I see it is, I mean, morally that's very bad, but also if I lose people's money, like, I won't be able to start another business. You know, it's like if people trust me with their money and I go bankrupt and lose it, like, who's going to fund my next business? So there's kind of that aspect of it as well. They're like, I need to make sure that I'm kind of doing the right thing and making sure this does work out. But yeah, some people say to me like, Ed, why do you care about the investors so much? Like, why does that limit what you do? Because it does make me take less risks, definitely. Some people are like, Ed, why do you care so much? So there's 2 sides of it. You know, some people are like, just take the risk and go for it. Some people are more kind of, you know, don't take as much risk and be careful. So I'm constantly battling with what the right decision is. I think in business there is no right or wrong decision. There's just a decision you make and stick with it and hope it works out.
Yeah. I'm just very interested in that whole process, in the way that you think through that, because especially in psychology or in performance coaching or whatever, we know that athletes who focus on winning tend to win, whereas athletes who are afraid of failing or not winning or they're afraid of losing tend to lose. So it's sort of like, it's interesting that you have that where you've got that focus. It sounds like it bounces back and forward.
It does, yeah, exactly.
But then at the same time, I think there's also a healthy amount of like, I like skepticism and pessimism and a bit of that, like, what if things do go wrong? Because if not, you can just be one of those dicks who just think everything's going to go right and don't look at, consequences and so on. So interesting. We'll have to get you back on the podcast in a couple of years and see how that mindset
see
shifted.
How it's gone. And it will shift. I mean,
yeah,
I think everything in business shifts as the business grows. The first kind of 3 years of the company, I took a lot of risks and they did pay off, fortunately. But as the company's growing, I've noticed I've taken, less and less risk. It's been like, I've put so much time into this so far. I've got it to where it is. Like, I don't want to mess it up now.
Yeah.
So it's like, over time, I have played it safer and safer, but that might change in the future. Probably will change in the future. I don't know.
It will have to. I guarantee it.
Yep.
Here's what I know from working with a lot of scaling business owners, and we're talking before, and I want to talk about your business and the scale and everything like that. There's something that I normally see it's normally around the $1 million to $3 million curse.
Yeah.
And it's that most business owners go, I just want to get to that million, get to the million, because it's like a massive, I now have $1 million business, or they might consider themselves a millionaire or whatever because they've got $1 million in revenue for a 12-month period or whatever. But when they hit it, they then start playing safe. And the thing that gets you to the million is just putting your balls on the line and going as hard as you can.
Yep.
And then all of a sudden they hit $1 million and they just flatline. And they'll flatline. Some of them will flatline for years. Some of them will collapse the business back down to a smaller, more manageable size for them. And then they'll push again and try to get, but normally there's this sort of phase in between about $1 million to $3 million. That's just like the swamp of shit where you have heaps of staffing problems. You've got normally like tax issues as well, accounting problems.
This is where we are right
issues.
now. You're ringing the bell, serious. I'm sitting here like getting stressed just thinking about it. No, so
business is super predictable and business owners are super predictable because it's like everyone goes through these phases.
With tech companies, right, everyone talks about startups and then everyone talks about scale-ups. Startups is those early days where things are really rough and you're just doing everything you can to make it work. Scale-up is like, all right, sales are really going up beautifully. You got good product market fit, and you're building this team and growing quite nice. What no one ever talks about is a spot in the middle, which is where we are right now. And it's very difficult because you've got these early, 2 or 3 years, which is just chaos. And then that ends, but you're not quite a scale up yet. Like we're not quite at a scale up point, but we're also not a scrappy startup. And then there's like this kind of long, hard slog where you're just trying to push through every little issue. You're trying to get your ducks in a row. You're trying to, learn about how to grow a company that can actually sustain itself. And then when you push through that, you become a scale up. So we're in that weird middle section. Have you heard of the Dunning-Kruger effect?
Yeah.
You have? You know about that?
Yeah.
So it's like we're in the trough right now.
Explain it for the listeners.
Yeah. So the best way to explain it, you picture a curve. It's like when you start a company, you're just like blindly optimistic. Like you don't really know enough about what you're doing, but you've got such confidence and optimism that it's like nothing could go wrong. Like I'll just work as hard as I can and it's going to work out. And then you kind of learn as much as you can and the optimism starts to get a bit more realistic. It's like you start to realize like, okay, this is going to be tough. Things are going to get in the way. And then you end up in this kind of trough at the bottom of that. I think they call it the trough of despair. And it's like when you start to realize like, or at least in your head, you start to think like, shit, is this going to work out?
You don't know shit about shit.
Yeah, you don't know shit about shit. Exactly. And then slowly your confidence comes back and your optimism comes back as you learn more and more and start to prove to yourself and to other people that you do actually know what you're doing. So we're kind of like, we're climbing out of that trough right now. Like, you know, we went so hard for the first kind of 3 years, and then we just had like this crazy optimism, and then the business reaches a point where it kind of it caps out. You know, you flatline, as you were saying, it flatlines, and you know, things, your systems and stuff start to fold in, and you got to try and build all of that, and that's that long hard slog that I spoke about earlier. And we're climbing out of that now. Things are looking good because we've finally kind of put all of our systems in place. Like I was talking to you before the podcast started, like about, I think 8 months ago, I realized that everything that happened within the company went through me. Like every little bit of sales, marketing, every little bit from the education team, the manufacturing team, the supply chain, literally everything. Like there wasn't a single employee who could take action without consulting with me. And that's kind of when I realized like, oh shit, I've built a business, not a company, right? It's like, I don't want a business, I want a company. And there's a big, big difference. So that's when, about 8 months ago, that's when I was like, okay, we're going to start to put some serious systems in place. We're going to put some key people in place. We're going to make it so that, you know, everything can really operate and grow, even if I'm not even here for a month or whatever. And we've successfully done that now. We're at the tail end of that. We've got a huge amount of feedback from our customers. We know what we have to do going forwards. We've got the financing in place to do that. So we're really kind of at that inflection point where we're climbing out of the trough of despair.
The pit of shit.
Yeah, exactly.
It is interesting because those stages are so predictable, but most people, especially in that Dunning-Kruger effect, right? It's that there's that like hidden optimism, and I find it really fascinating having worked with humans in, I guess, human behavior now for 21 years. You can tell someone who's an expert because most of their answers are maybe.
Yep.
Because when you're an expert, it's like, yeah, we think that this is going to work and this is going to go great. And you're like, yeah, maybe.
Yep.
Well, what do you think about this? Well, I don't know. We'll have to sort of figure it out and see what happens. They sit in a gray zone most of the time. Whereas what I find is depending on where someone's at in that pit of shit or the Dunning-Kruger effect, they're either overconfident and they're like the experts. So you see it on social media where they're like, this is the way that it is. And it's great because most people, you know, it grabs attention. But the truth is there could be like a million different reasons why something's happening.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think the clearest example of the Dunning-Kruger effect is the stock market. I don't know how many mates you have that have invested in the stock market, but every single person who starts investing in shares, including myself, is like, oh, how hard can it be, right? And they'll go and they'll buy up like Apple and Tesla and Google, and they'll start to do some analysis on those shares, and they'll be like, these tech companies are the future, right? And there'll be a big rally in tech companies. There always is every few years, right? And they'll just keep pouring cash into it. I did this. And then eventually, right, the market shifts away from tech. Tech cools down. A few big investors sell. Tech absolutely tanks. And your portfolio is just like destroyed.
It's happening in the property market right now.
Exactly. Then you're in the valley of despair. You realize, okay, investing is not as easy as it looks. Choosing the right stocks is pretty much impossible. And then you go, okay, I'll just buy the S&P 500. and then you climb out of it and you get over that.
Yeah.
Like I've got so many mates that, you know, come to me and they're like, oh, I've just discovered the stock market. I'm buying this, and this. And I say to them like, don't do it. And a month later, they're just negative like thousands every time.
I've got a decent size share portfolio, but I started off doing day trading. So I was doing foreign exchange.
Yep.
Then I tried options because foreign exchange, I was like, this sucks. I made money and lost money and made money and lost money. And then I was like, you know, I'm going to go on to do some options trading. And then I was like, well, this fucking sucks because I pretty much made money, lost money, made money, lost money, and was still the same. And then over time, especially going through those big peaks and troughs, you just go, this is just stupid, like the market over a long period of time. So, you know, a lot of the time I just these days invest in index funds or, you know, big blue chip companies, and I just reinvest dividends. Like I actually haven't sold a share, I don't think, in like 15, 20 years. I just keep buying and just the account just keeps stacking.
Yep.
There's a great book called Winning the Loser's Game. I don't know if you've read it.
No, I haven't. No.
Oh, it's a brilliant book. So it's all the statistics of the market over the last 120 years. So Winning the Loser's Game by Charles D. Ellis.
Okay.
And he did market analysis. And what he found was that day traders over an extended period of time literally just wipe out all their cash. The people who are the ones who make money in any market are the ones who they just play the long game, and you essentially have compounding.
Yep.
That's really how you make a lot of money.
Well, I don't know the statistics on it, but like most, even massive hedge funds underperform the S&P 500. These are supposedly the best investors on the planet that know how to do all the analysis and pick the right stocks, blah, blah, blah. And almost all of them, from what I've heard, underperform S&P 500. So it's like, even if the best investors on the planet can't outperform it over a long period of time, then like, what makes you think that you can sit in your bedroom and figure that out, right? So it's like
all the dudes who are day trading. They're like, I'm day trading and we're like beating the markets, and I'm like, dude, they've got quantum computers and the smartest fucking people on the planet. You're not beating them.
It's like, you have almost always, you have some success for a couple months. Almost always. I don't know why. Everyone starts with success and it hooks you in like the freaking pokies, man.
Yep.
And then next thing you know, you just get absolutely humbled. And that, to me, is the clearest description of the Dunning-Kruger effect.
I 100% agree with that. I think that's probably one of the best explanations as well. It happens all the time. I get people who send me messages and they're like, I don't know whether you get this as well. Like, I just want to make money. Like, what's the best way to make money? And you're like, I don't know, fucking add value.
Yep.
Because there's no, like, how else do you make money? Money is an exchange of value. The only way you can make money long term is an exchange of value.
Yep.
Money doesn't just appear out of thin air. I mean, they print it and shit like that. But it's like, you don't just make money.
Yep.
There's a reason why, like, companies like Apple, the reason why they've made a shit ton of money over a long period of time is because they keep adding value into the market. And companies that don't do that go bust.
Yep.
It's really that fucking simple.
Yep. Not exactly. Everyone on Instagram's driving like a Lamborghini and they got this get rich quick scheme they're trying to sell you, but it's because they want you to buy the course.
Fuck,
right?
I've been discovered.
You're the real deal,
I have
though.
people every week.
You're not
You're
renting
a fucking
yours.
Scammer.
You're not renting yours, right? You're the real deal. That's the difference.
They're fake number plates. Come
Yeah,
on. I've had
yeah,
people do that before. They're like,
Exactly.
that's rented. Mate, it's had my number plates on it for the last 5 years.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, whatever.
And you got your logo across the back of it. It's pretty believable. But yeah, look, it's like all these guys, they're like, oh, this is how I became, this is how I got $20 million at like 20 years old. It's like, I don't believe it.
I've actually worked.
I want it to be true, but I don't believe it.
I've worked with a few of those guys, and these days I'm like, just don't be a fucking wanker. Because they literally like, I don't want to get too much into it because I'll probably upset a few people who are around in the groups that I sort of know. I try not to. But it's just, it pisses me off because I think that all industries go through this, right? Like I've been talking, like a lot of our community are in the trade and building industry. Not all of them, like there's a lot of service-based businesses and so on as well. But, a lot of people now are going, I want to get out of trade and service-based businesses or property-based businesses because the market's starting to dip off. And I'm like, this is the time you want to stay in.
Yep.
Because people make all the money after the dip.
Yep.
So after everything fucking, I don't like using the term crash because it doesn't crash. It just dips and then there's a recorrection. But everyone makes it from the bottom up. The problem is that I always see money in any industry. If you ever watch little kids play football or rugby or soccer or football or whatever, they all just chase the ball.
Yep.
That's literally money in society. People are like, oh, I want to start this type of business. Why? Oh, I don't know. Like, it's because they've seen someone who made shitloads of money without having to work easy because the industry is pumping at the moment. Like, you watch it. Like, it started off from in my era. Like, you've got the internet era, the .com boom.
Yep.
Everyone's like, man, just websites are going to make shitloads of money. And then they realize it's not.
That's the thing that you learn the hard way is that when something's all the rage and everyone's piling in on it, that is the exact time to leave it alone, right? Like
I agree.
that's when there's going to be a bubble. It's going to go up and then it's going to go down, and a lot of people are going to lose money. When I was in school, I was dumb enough to buy GameStop. Remember that?
No shit. I just listened to the podcast of the CEO of GameStop this morning.
Yeah. Oh, okay. That's a good
on the All In
coincidence.
podcast.
I was dumb enough to buy that, but I didn't have much money, you see. So to me, it was a very big
Neither
risk,
do
right?
most people who are doing it.
Yeah, well, exactly, right? So to me, it was the amount of money I had to put on through my stock account was like significant compared to my net worth as a like 15-year-old. So I waited way too long to buy it, and it was going up, and it was going up, and it was going up, and then eventually I was like, "No, I'm doing it. I don't want to miss out on this." Bought it at the top, absolutely tanked, literally the next day, and then panic sold halfway down, lost pretty much all my money, and then I think it was like a couple months later or something, went through the roof again. So it just, if everyone, that was when I learned the lesson. If everyone's piling on it, stay away from it.
I just learned a long time ago, especially with money. Money's not emotional. Money doesn't give a fuck about you. It just moves to where value's at.
Yep.
And you can make money short term, and you can sell shit to idiots.
Yep.
You can do that shit, but it doesn't last. The only thing that lasts is fair and equitable value exchange over something that's valuable. And so if you make something that's valuable, you create value, you add value, you're always going to, that's why like I have people come to me and they're like, aren't you ever afraid that you'll go bankrupt or lose money? And I'm like, no, man, because I can add value.
Yep.
Right? Like I'm wicked at sales. If I lose the business, I'll still make $500,000 a year doing sales for somebody else. Like it doesn't matter.
Yep.
I'll fucking figure it out.
Yep.
But that's because, and this is what most business owners that I speak to don't think about, you know, when I'm on the phone doing sales with them. They don't see themselves as being the asset, which is why they're always scared.
Right.
I'm not scared because I'm the fucking asset of the company.
Yeah.
I can do sales. I can do marketing. I can go out. I can network. I'm a good communicator. They're all skills that I've accumulated by valuing myself.
Yep.
And then now because of that, I'm not scared.
Yep.
Whereas most business owners are scared because they don't see themselves as being the asset. They see the product or the service or the business being the asset, but they're always scared and afraid and they always play safe.
This was kind of one of my thought processes when I started this company is like in the early days, to me, it was like, you know, I'm an 18-year-old, I'm going to start this company. Like, I don't really know what I'm doing, but I figured that even if the company didn't work out and all turned to shit after year 2 or 3 or whatever, at least I would have learned a lot about these key skills, sales, networking, all these things that will, you know, if this one doesn't work out, at least lead me towards starting the next one and give me the skills I need to start the next one. And it's been, well, nearly 5 years, I think 4.5 years so far. I've learned a lot of that stuff. And that's, you know, those skills, regardless of what I'm doing in the future, will be critical. So it was a consideration in the early days was if it fails, at least I'll have those skills. You
see yourself as being the asset. I'm going to go off on a little tangent because there's a couple of different examples just for, you know, listeners, but, you know, also it might interest you as well. You can tell the value of how people think and where they perceive an asset is by the amount of value that they attach to it, right? So as an example, about a month or so ago, I get on the phone and there's this guy's like, oh, my business is sort of stuck and I'm frustrated and staff are useless. And he's in the pit of shit, right? Like he's the bottleneck of the business. He just wants to fire everybody every day or punch on in the car park because he's just pissed off with everybody and he fucking hates life and he hates himself. And then he goes out and drinks all the time and he's eating all this food because he's a baller as well because he's like made $1 million in the business or whatever. And so he's like, there's part of him that's like, I'm successful, but the other part of him's like, I hate everything and I hate everybody. And so he's like on that pendulum of, you know, just this emotional craziness, right?
Yep.
Which is the pit of shit. And then anyway, so we get on the call, he's telling me about all this stuff. And then he's telling me about, you know, how he's been looking at buying a Rolex and the Rolex is 30 grand. And then he's going on this, you know, $120,000 holiday overseas. And then he's going away at the end of the year and stuff. And so I'm just listening to him just talk and stuff. And I was like, all right, cool. So we go through all the problems of the business. I'm like, cool. I know where you're at. I know what we need to do. And here's the thing.
Yep.
You're going to pay for it either way. So as you know, you pay for every lesson.
Yep.
You're going to pay through your own fuck ups and your own mistakes.
Yep.
You're going to pay through staff's fuck ups or staff mistakes.
Yep.
Or you're going to pay somebody else to fast track it. You're paying for it somehow, right? And anyway, so he gets to the end. I tell him that it's 30,000 to do the Odyssey, our business program. He's like, oh yeah, man, fuck, I don't know. Like, it's expensive and the usual bullshit. I need to think about it.
Don't buy
and he
the
pushes
Rolex.
back and
don't buy the Rolex.
that's exactly. And he was a referral from one of our clients, and this client has grown his company from like he sat down with me at $1 million a year, and now he's doing 1.6 million a week.
Yeah,
right?
A week.
So this guy,
a week.
A week.
Jesus.
So this guy came because he's seen his friend who works with us, the scale and the growth, right, over a 3-year period. So at the start of the call, he's like, yeah, I know, I've seen his growth and I know a few people have done your program and how awesome it is. But then it gets to the 30 grand, right? And he's like, oh yeah, man. And then I sort of like overcame the objections and shit like that. And I'm trying to like, oh no, man, I don't know. Anyway, he pushed away and he's like, oh, I don't know, I feel uncomfortable with this. And I'm definitely not going to make a decision. So he pushed back. Anyway, I followed him up a couple of times. And anyway, I spoke to the client that I have and I said, the client's like, how's this guy going? And I said, he's pushes back. And he said, I fucking told him he was talking about the fucking Rolex. And I told him that was a stupid investment and that the best investment was him in the business. And I said, but you now know how most people think, right? He sees the Rolex as being more valuable than his own knowledge. And then he wonders why his business is stuck.
Yep.
It's not that hard to figure out. No. Anyone who thinks logically can figure that shit out. When people think emotionally and they're insecure, the Rolex is everything because the Rolex tells all his friends that he's a baller.
Yep. Look, I don't understand Rolexes and stuff. At the end of the day, when you're running a business, it's going to be so hard for so long that eventually you got to reap some benefit from the business.
100%.
That doesn't mean that, it's got to be some, big splash of cash. It's like I got myself a car that wasn't, hugely expensive. It wasn't really a big investment at all, but just so I had some, something to show for it, and it's weird. I wouldn't say it's anything about being like insecure. It was more like, I've worked my ass off for 4 years. Like I gotta get some reward out of this. All right. But, I don't know where I was going with that story.
Yeah, I understand that. But when it comes to like in that situation where you're in shit and you're struggling and you're stressed every day and you're frustrated and you're burnt out and you're tired and someone puts a solution in front of you and then you have to decide whether you're going to buy a Rolex or the solution, what's the answer?
Yep. And there's a difference that you got to get your head around inside a company, which is the difference between personal money and business money.
I agree.
It's like, to me, when I started the company, I was an 18-year-old kid, barely $1 to my name. Spending $4 at the school canteen was a big spend for me. And all of a sudden, I've got,
Fuck, I couldn't even. My parents couldn't even afford the canteen, mate.
Yeah,
I used to just get a handful of chips off mates.
Yeah. I'd go to the canteen once a fortnight. Seriously, it was like I didn't have anything at all to my name. It's like all the money I spent was to try and keep my car running, basically. But when you're running a business, like I'm doing that while simultaneously I'm spending like in the early days like 10, 20, 30 grand a month to try and grow the business, and like. Psychologically, that was just such a weird thing to try and get around, the difference between personal money and company money. And it's another thing that no one ever talks about. Like no one ever discusses that. But there's such a shift when you start a business between those two extremes, because running a business is just so damn expensive. Like everyone's trying to suck money out of you in some way. Every week or every day there's some random bill or expense that comes up that you just can't get out of. You just got to pay it. And it's like, if that was my personal money, like I would be like just on the ground crying. But it's not. It's a business expense. You've got to do that to grow the business. And I think this, that 30 grand is a very similar thing. It's like, you can spend it on yourself, which is a huge expense, or for the business, it's a drop in the ocean, and you got to spend that to make it.
100%. So now tell us, you start off at a young age, you've seen the thing with Elon Musk and you go, right, I'm going to start putting shit up into space.
Yep.
Run us through the process. So how does that start? Like what was the first thing that you did to then start that in motion? Was it the rockets that you shot off in the oval, or was it like, I'm going to start to try to build some satellites, or like...
Day one was, I want to work on rockets or satellites. That's where it all started. And I'm not going to wait, 10 years to get the degree and work my way up or whatever. And no one's going to hire me because I'm a kid in school. So it's like the only solution if I want to get involved with this stuff is to start doing it myself. So that led to the model rocket. And the goal of the model rocket was not to make a rocket that would work, because I knew it would fail, but to make a rocket that was as advanced as I could to try and push my engineering as much as possible. To just try and like make a bunch of stuff, fail a bunch of times until it works, and learn a lot about engineering. But I figured if I want to work on rockets or satellites, I've got to start to learn engineering at some serious level. So that's why I did the rocket. And I learned a huge amount. Like everything was custom made on that rocket, from the actual, the body or the airframe of the rocket through to the control system and the electronics, the launch pad, the control system to initiate the countdown. Everything was custom made by.
What's it all made out of? Like, what do you make the rockets out of at that scale?
Yeah, it was only like it was less than 1.5 meters tall. It wasn't anything huge, right? The rocket itself.
I mean,
was,
1.5 meters is still a decent sized like fucking bomb.
Yeah, well, exactly.
You know,
Well, the one thing I didn't make was the rocket motor, because that is the equivalent of making bombs in my dad's shed. So I was like, I'm not making the rocket motor. I'm buying that from a professional. Yeah,
Do you just buy those online, or like where do you get? Well, if I were to buy a rocket motor for a 1.5 meter high,
yeah, brief tangent
object, like where do you get that from?
Yeah, you need a permit to purchase explosives. I wasn't 18, so I couldn't get one. So you can imagine the conversation when I walked into Mum's office and said, "Mum, can you get this permit to purchase explosives so I can get a motor for my model rocket?" Fortunately, she did. And then getting a hold of them is still tricky, because who sells them, right? The only person I could find who would sell it to me was a local pyrotechnician who had the rocket motor in storage for over 20 years, which affected the propellant, which is why it caught fire on the first launch. So the fire came from the faulty rocket motor.
So the propellant you're using almost like an explosive to get it to go up versus like a fuel?
It's the exact same stuff that's used on the rocket boosters that NASA uses. The exact same propellant. So it's not as an explosive as in like a detonation. It's more of a slow, controlled burn, right? So it's meant to burn, at a certain level for a certain number of seconds, so it doesn't just literally explode. You don't want it to explode. You want it to put out thrust in one direction safely.
What's the fuel?
It's been a few years since I thought about this. Ammonium perchlorate composite propellant, APCP. So it's not black powder. It's slightly different. As I said, the stuff that NASA uses on their rocket boosters, I think black powder is good for little tiny rockets, but it's a bit too volatile, a bit too unpredictable. This stuff it's a mixture of a whole bunch of stuff that's then packed into this little plastic tube with a nozzle on the end of it, and the nozzle basically holds the pressure inside of it and then directs the pressure in one direction nicely. Yeah, very hard to get a hold of that stuff. That's quite the tangent, but
no, it's good because I'm fascinated by this stuff. This is why I like doing podcasts as well. It's just as much for me as it is the audience, because I know that when Elon Musk was going to launch his rockets, he had to go through a whole bunch of shit with military and all that type of stuff, because essentially
it's a hell of a
the
story.
Difference between a rocket and a interballistic missile that essentially, you can put a nuclear warhead on and blow up a fucking country. It's pretty much the same thing.
Well, almost nobody actually knows why SpaceX started, right? What they're doing now is not they didn't start SpaceX to make reusable rockets. That was not the initial goal. They started because NASA had done nothing since the early moon landings, because the budget was just obliterated after the country lost interest in it. So SpaceX, or particularly Elon's goal, he wanted to put a plant on Mars with basically a live camera, live streaming the plant growth to try and raise public interest, to try and give NASA a kick up the arse to try and do something. So literally his entire goal was to try and get the public excited enough to get NASA more funding to get back into the space sector properly, get back to regular launches. So he just sold PayPal, basically. It was a different company, but turned into PayPal. He just sold that for like $200 million. Went to Russia to try and buy a refurbished ICBM, intercontinental ballistic missile. And there was like this geek from Silicon Valley wanting to buy this missile in Russia. So that literally spat on his shoes and said, F off, no way. So then he went back to California and was like, well, I'm still going to do it. I've got the money, so I'll make my own rocket. That's how SpaceX started. It was literally just they wouldn't sell him the missile, so he'll make his own rocket.
Which is odd because back then Russia or the ex-Soviet Union you could buy anything.
Yeah.
Have you watched that? Is it the Netflix special, whatever? They buy that dude buys a submarine.
No, I don't think so.
Oh, there's a whole story where this dude, I'm pretty sure he's from the US.
Right.
And I'm not sure whether they were using it for drugs or whatever, went to the ex-USSR. Someone can probably correct me in the comments or tell me that I'm a fucking idiot or whatever. But again.
You can't know everything.
Yeah, but there's a whole documentary where these guys go to buy a Russian submarine.
Right.
Like a legitimate Russian submarine.
Far out. Did they succeed?
I think from memory, it's been years since I watched it, but yes, they did, but then they ended up getting arrested for trying to buy a Russian submarine.
It didn't implode though.
No, it definitely didn't.
Like that event a few years back.
Well, I mean, it's a legitimate like military submarine, so it shouldn't implode.
Yeah.
It should be engineered well enough, but there's definitely a lot of crazy stories. I've got some friends and stuff who are in who live in different places around the world, and there's some definitely crazy stories about what you can get in Russia or the from the ex-USSR, all the shit that's still hanging around, all the military stuff. Okay, so we were talking about your journey of now you built your rocket, now you're into satellites.
Yeah, yep.
So how did you get into satellites? Like what was the thought process around, I've got my mum's credit card and put her details on or however she paid for it, but now you've got your explosives, you can send explosives and stuff. How do you get shit up into space?
When I was in school, I recently moved to the Barossa Valley. So like my parents didn't know anyone, right? And it's like, if you want a job at a young age, it's like you either go to Macca's or KFC or you get a job with someone that your parents know. Now, I applied at Macca's and KFC. Both of them rejected me. So that was not an option. And my parents didn't know anyone because we just moved to the area. So I started a business out of necessity. It was like, the only way that I can make money to fund these projects is to start a business. So the first business I started was actually in year 9 before the engineering stuff started. It's a t-shirt company. I designed some t-shirts, ordered a bunch of stock from China, had it all kind of sorted out in my bedroom, and then people would buy t-shirts from me. Sold that company for $1,500, which is not a lot of money, but for a kid in year 9, that is the jackpot.
It's a lot of lollies.
Yeah, exactly. That's a big win, all right? And that's when my interest in business started to kind of grow initially. It was like, I just created $1,500 out of, just thin air, really. Like just, add value, just figured it out and created money. I didn't have to work in exchange for hours or whatever. That was kind of the early it's kind of cool. That money funded the eBay store, which I used to fund the projects. The eBay store, I was buying bulk electronic parts from China again, straight from the manufacturer, storing it in my bedroom and selling it on eBay for a profit. So that funded everything. I literally could barely move in my bedroom because the whole floor was just these big storage tubs full of all these parts. And I had spots between the tubs where I'd step over to try and get into bed. All right. It was just chaotic.
Your parents must have loved you.
They didn't like the delivery, man. It was just seriously every day I was getting 20 packages a day of just so much stuff coming into the house, and dad's working from home, constant knocks on the door all day, bugging him when I'm at school. Anyway, so the eBay store was great. I was doing, it was around the ballpark of $10,000 a month.
It's not bad.
When that was, going well. So that paid for the parts, paid for my first car. So eventually year 12 came along. Obviously I had to focus on school a little bit more than I was prior to that. With exams and all that important stuff or relatively important stuff. So the rocket project had to go on hold.
Just on that, did you ever have the teachers tell you off and you think, fuck you, I make more money than you?
No, that thought didn't cross my mind.
Oh, really?
I
would have thought that
I
if I was doing 120K a year.
It feels like that in university sometimes. I wasn't a very good student. I was kind of most of my grades were B's, because to me, when I was in school, it was a lot of the stuff I'm learning was well, I know what I want to do with my life. It's very clear to me what I want to do and what I want to be working on. So why do I need to know this? So for me, school was do the homework in recess and lunch, race home as quick as I could, work on the rocket until 10 p.m., spend the next hour packaging all the orders from eBay and then go to bed. Because it was all I cared about in life was the project that I was working on. It was just like an absolute obsession. So it was like, I didn't care about school. It was just do the bare minimum, get through it, and then just race back home to work on the rocket. So I wasn't a very good student, but year 12 came along. I had to put more time into school. So the rocket had to go on hold. It was just taking too much time. But basically, I filled that gap in my life by making my year 12 electronics project a satellite prototype. So then I could build the satellite as part of the schoolwork. And I'd done the rocket thing. I'd made some progress on that, so I wanted to learn more about satellites. So that's how I got into that. And then eventually school finished, and as I mentioned earlier, there was just this sense of freedom. Like, what am I going to do? I want to do something big, something crazy, something different, something exciting, something where I'm going to learn a lot. So it was like combining all these passions together, the engineering, the space, the business, into one big startup venture. And for those watching that don't know what this business is that I'm doing right now, we make satellites for education. So we work with school students in the classroom. School students actually build a satellite, and then they do a bunch of experiments in the classroom, and eventually some actually launch those satellites to space. The reason for that is to try and contextualize what students are learning, to try and show them, what they're learning in maths or physics or any of those really STEM-heavy subjects is actually, used for something, is important for something, might be used in the future for something, relates to something. It's not just these abstract concepts. Because my experience in school was very much, you need to learn this so that you can pass an exam, so that you can get a good ATAR, which to me is just like a terrible way of learning. Like, learning so that you can pass an exam is completely useless. Mm-hmm. Like, what's the exam for anyway? It's not. You need to be learning something because it's relevant to what you're doing and you need to use it. Otherwise, why would you learn it? So,
do you think the schooling system, just based on that, is similar to politics, where you get most politicians, they come out of school, they go to university, they do some shitty social science degree that doesn't really lead to anything, and they try to figure out, whether there is I'm probably going to get in trouble and a lot of hate for this, but like, what the pronouns are of gum trees and whether there's enough, like just some weird fucking experiment or whatever they're doing. Then they go out and they get into politics and they just become a career politician. Yep. Do you think part of the problem with the schooling system is that there are a lot of people who come out of school, they go to university to become a teacher, and then now they're a teacher that teaches the system that they went through, and now you've had generations upon generations who are essentially have just gone through school and are now teaching at school, who then teach the next generation of teachers, as kids to then become teachers and so on, versus having people who have actually gone out, figured out what they're doing, whether they're a physicist or whether they're a mathematician or whatever, and now they're in the school who have an application for what their knowledge is.
It is extraordinarily hard to change education. Part of what we're doing as a company is trying to change education, and it's nearly impossible because things are done this way. It's done this way year after year, and changing it would just be such a drastic shift. It's like there's really two types of teachers that we find. The first type is the teachers that are really, really passionate. They go above and beyond. They really want to find the best thing for their students, and they want their students to love what they're learning and, take that into the future. That's, I don't want to get any hate for saying this, but it's probably 5 or 10% of teachers in reality. And that's most of the teachers that we work with are those 5 or 10% of teachers. The rest of the teachers, the mass majority of teachers, they might still be passionate about it, but they're not going to go above and beyond. They've got a secure job. Things are taught in a certain system, and they're just going to keep doing the same thing year after year after year, regardless of what changes out in the real world, if you will. So, if the majority of the teachers are doing that same thing year after year, then changing that is just, impossible. They're so resistant to change. The other thing is, like, there are a few teachers that genuinely have done incredible things and then go on to teach in school. That does happen. But most teachers, they know what they've learned in university to teach, but, they're not, qualified engineers. And that's okay. You can't expect every teacher to be a qualified engineer, but it just means that the education is limited to what that teacher is given to teach. And these are just more reasons why it's so damn hard to change how things are taught and what students are learning in the classroom, and just the overall kind of mindset around education in schools.
That's why I changed to specifically working with business owners or people who are in high performance. Because what I found was when I first started doing a lot of mindset work and education and coaching and so on, I found that a lot of people would come in, but they were already defined by dogmatic views. And so like I can talk about, there's all this shit about trauma and how trauma affects. Well, I've studied the brain. Where is trauma in the brain? And they'll say, well, it's because different parts. Yeah, but there's ways you can get those parts engaged and all that stuff. But I think outside the box, because with human performance, you either have a result or you don't, right? Like if you're a business owner, you've either got the outcome and you've achieved the goal or you haven't. It's black and white. Like it's yes or no answer. So when I'm dealing with the general public, a lot of the time there's these dogmatic views like, well, you're wrong because my belief is X. Yeah, but you don't have a fucking result. Yeah, but it doesn't matter. That's what I believe. Yeah. Okay, well, whatever. Whereas when you're in business and performance, you're either winning or you're not winning. You're achieving or not achieving. I don't really give a shit. It's just if you don't want to achieve, you can have whatever belief you want. Yeah. But if you want to achieve, you either have the result or you don't. And if you don't, then let's fucking get to work and make it happen. Most people have, very strong opinions of various things. And I think politics is a very good example of this. I will never hate on a decision that a politician makes unless I have an ironclad solution that would have been far better, because I think most people, a politician makes a decision and they're like, oh, they're an idiot. Why would you do that? More taxes, whatever. They hate it. There's uproar. They're losing votes left, right, and center. But at the end of the day, if you really think about a lot of what politicians do, like a lot of the time, there's not actually a better solution. Like the solution's not great. For example, things with inflation and stuff like that. But like at the end of the day, if I don't have like an ironclad solution that just makes sense, that is so flawless that there's no reason to not do it, then I'm not going to say anything bad about, that politician's decision or anything in the world other than that. It's like, having strong opinions, doesn't make sense unless you have a better solution. So you were talking about changing education. Run me through that. So how do you do that now with schools? So yeah, give us more about. So at the moment, as I kind of briefly touched on before, we're using satellites in the classroom to try and contextualize what students are learning. Now, that's all well and good for those 5 or 10% of teachers who want to take on new things, want the best for their students, and they've adopted that really, really well, which has led to this kind of explosive growth in the early days, in the first few years of the company. We've kind of, at least in Australia, we've reached most of those teachers, hence we've plateaued a little bit. So, we're really trying to shift from those early adopters to the majority market. Have you heard of a book called Crossing the Chasm? No. So I've never actually read it, but I did read a 15-minute overview of it, because I don't really have time to read books, that describes what it is. Basically, it's a bell curve which shows all the people in the market. At the start, you've got that kind of 5 or 10%, those early adopters. They're willing to take risks. They want, the latest things, the best things. And then you get into this kind of mass market. Where a lot of particularly tech startups die is when they're trying to cross the chasm between those two. Because all of a sudden you're trying to go from this product which, works but might not be perfect, that those people accept, to needing to have something that is the best thing on the planet. All of a sudden you go from people viewing you as a startup to people comparing you to the biggest and best education companies on the planet. So there's this, dramatic shift that has to be achieved to be able to go from those 5 to 10% of people to the remaining 90% of people. And that's crossing the chasm, which is where we are right now. The solution to that is we're building basically a software platform that goes around the product that makes it really, really simple to teach it. So not only is it that
we're delivering this, amazing new form of education into the classroom, but we're also making it like so easy for teachers that it's even quicker and easier than what they're currently doing. That's the only way that we can really get to that mass market, is by building this software that makes it just stupidly easy for the teachers. So that's what we're working on right now. And yeah, that's the big solution for us next.
So I'm in school.
Yep.
I get to build a satellite.
Yep.
After I build it, what happens?
Yep. The satellite has a whole bunch of sensors inside of it. So you're doing experiments in the classroom. You're maneuvering the satellite in different ways to collect different data. You're then downloading that data and you're analyzing it in various ways, right? So as an example, rather than doing a bunch of equations in a textbook to learn calculus, you're downloading real motion data from a satellite that you use in the classroom, and you're then analyzing that to learn calculus.
So when you say a satellite, you build it in the classroom,
Yep.
or are we up in space yet?
Oh, these ones aren't in space yet. So the majority of them stay in the classroom. We do put some in space with student experiments on it, and we give students the data from that. But the majority of them are satellite replicas. So most of the kits that we ship to schools, the 1,700 kits that we've shipped so far, they just stay in the classroom. But it does the same things, has the same parts. So students, they're not just learning about calculus, all these different physics concepts or whatever it might be, but they're also learning about satellites and what's in satellites and why satellites are important, which impacts everyday life a lot more than what most people think.
Run us through that. Like where would people be surprised that satellites have a massive impact?
Every time you go to a coffee shop, you buy a coffee, tap your card, use satellites to do that. Google Maps doesn't work without satellites. Communications would be very slow and terrible without satellites, like early 19th century type of stuff. Weather forecasting would be extremely inaccurate without satellites. Global security would be an absolute mess. There's a lot of defense satellites doing a lot of surveillance activities which are necessary for, the safety of everyone's individual countries. So, that's just a few at the top of my head. The internet's, you wouldn't get internet to a lot of people without satellites. There's still underwater cables, so the internet would still work. It just wouldn't be as quick or as efficient, and a lot of people wouldn't have access to it. So yeah, it's, each day the average person would use satellite technology like 10, 20 times easily without knowing it.
What do you think the future is of space exploration, space travel? What do you see in the next 10 years?
Yep. These are the big questions now. So the goal right now for most companies, SpaceX, NASA, is the moon, trying to get people back onto the moon because it's been a very long time. But this time trying to get to the moon and build a base on the moon. So there'll be people living on the moon full time, similar to the International Space Station, but on the moon. That is so that people can learn how to live sustainably on other planets before eventually going to Mars. The reasoning for the whole Mars civilization thing, it sounds pretty crazy, but it is actually very important. It's basically a backup of humanity. Eventually, not in our lifetimes, but eventually something's going to happen to Earth, whether it's of our own doing, nuclear war, or something else like the Earth gets closer to the sun and it gets too hot for humanity to survive, or there's an asteroid that hits Earth. Something will happen to Earth eventually, hopefully in many, many tens of thousands of years, but it's bound to happen eventually statistically. For that reason, we need humans on another planet. So if something happens to Earth, it doesn't just delete life as we know it. We need enough people on Mars that there's an entire self-sustaining colony on Mars. And that's Elon's big goal. That's the whole reason for Starship and everything he's doing at the moment with SpaceX is to try and achieve that. There's also a big shift with trying to put data centers in space. I'll be honest, I'm not an expert on that. I haven't done too much research into it, but trying to use the resources of space, like, the huge amount of solar power to be able to sustain data centers in space and then beam that data back down to Earth.
And cooling.
Yeah, cooling's a tricky one. Obviously, if anyone's going to do it, it's going to be SpaceX. They're the masters of these things. But it's still very difficult. I think it's still a little bit off in terms of years, but it'll happen eventually. That's a big shift. The current biggest shift, of course, is Starlink internet. That's been a massive, massive game changer for, again, I don't know the statistics off the top of my head, but a relatively small percentage of the world was connected to the internet. Realistically, there's so many people in these different kind of third world countries or remote areas that just didn't have access, or at least not reliable access.
Third world countries. If you're in Adelaide, it's hard enough to get it at Grange.
Yeah.
Because they don't have a tower there.
Yeah, I live in Blair Athol, right? This is shit. Telstra shit. Both big telcos are just like terrible. Like, our internet sucks, and we can't get NBN. Long story why, but so anyway, Starlink's changed that. Starlink's given high speed internet everywhere, even on planes and ships as well now. So this is one of the current big revolutions in space, and there'll be constant changes. Another one is pharmaceuticals. Manufacturing pharmaceuticals in zero gravity is highly beneficial. I don't know the science behind it, but basically how the cells form is, beneficial for something. It's much more pure or whatever. I don't know. Do your own research. But there's this whole revolution of companies manufacturing pharmaceuticals in space and bringing that back to Earth. And with advancements in spacecraft and space capsule reliability and the cost to get to space, all of a sudden that's possible. There's the whole other side of things, which I don't believe in, but that's asteroid mining. Some of these asteroids out there have, hundreds of trillions of dollars worth of minerals on those asteroids. Like enough minerals that if we were able to mine it, the value of gold would be like nothing because there'd be so much of it, right?
On that though, it's interesting because a lot of I want to clarify that because there's a couple of things here. With gold, a lot of people think that gold is just this storage of value, or people with gold are just these rich people.
Yep.
But the thing is, all technology is pretty much using gold and all these rare earth minerals and stuff like that.
Yep.
So the most advanced technologies that we have, whether they be working on cures for cancer or disease profiles or things like that, they all need those rare earth minerals. That's why they're getting mined.
Yeah, you got gold in your phone right now, and a bunch of other rare minerals as well. It's
people are literally cutting power lines out of the ground and dragging them out just to get copper out, right?
Yeah, that's some.
We got some meth heads
some
using
northern suburbs activities.
Some copper mining. What have you been doing today, Davo? Just mining some copper.
Mining some copper. Yeah,
just ripping out some power cords.
Yeah.
But there's that. And the other conversation that I've had with a few people over the last couple of years is they'll ask questions like, how stupid is it that we're going to try to get on Mars or even going to the moon and things like that? Like, what's the point?
Yep.
But then I always explain, like, if you look back, what was the point of someone hopping on a ship and floating across the ocean in the middle of fucking nowhere, which we had no idea what was there, in order to map coastlines and all of that? We tend to go to these places to find new information that help us to live a better life in some way, shape or form.
Yeah. I think media does a very poor job of portraying why space is so necessary. It's like there's a lot of space
everything.
Yeah, there's a lot of space companies in Australia that have got like big government grants and stuff, and like you read the comment and it's just a mass of people saying like, why are we investing in space? There's cost of living crisis, this, and like on the surface you can see where they're coming from, but they just don't understand well enough what the importance of all of this is. They don't understand the why behind it or the necessity for it. So they just see it as, reckless expenditure by the government. And that kind of links back to what I was saying before about like, I'm not going to hate on a government decision unless I really understand it and don't have a better solution. Have a better solution.
There was a lot of that talk around AI as well. Like now there's talk around AI, people losing their jobs, all of that sort of stuff. But there's no real conversation around how it gets integrated to help people with their jobs. And so it's only one side of that getting portrayed. I mean, AI is being used to spot disease patterns and disease profiles that the normal human eye or the current technology can't do.
It's more of a...
It's also getting fines for fucking us driving around as well. And using our mobile phones and shit. Not having your seatbelt on, eating a pizza while you're driving. I saw a photo. Some guy was cooking a steak on his dashboard. That was
fake,
was it? Yeah. That was Jackson Doherty.
Always check these things, make sure it's real or fake.
Yeah.
But there's not... AI is not replacing jobs. It's just a shift in the job market, right? There's still the same number of jobs. It's not like there's going to be some mass amount of people not having jobs because of it. It's just people are doing different jobs. It's rather than especially once robotics come into it, and you have AI humanoid robotics. All of a sudden, these like repetitive menial tasks will be done by robotics, leaving humans to do more advanced tasks that really require the human brain or the advanced movement that humans can do. So it's not something to be scared of as in replacing jobs. It's more, thinking to the future and think of like, okay, is AI and robotics going to replace your job? And if it is, then what's, something else that you can transition to allow AI into that? It's a drastic shift, but it's not replacing jobs. It's not deleting jobs.
I think you can see this, like there's a reason why I love studying history, because if you go back, like this same thing happened when you go from horse and cart to cars. The horse and cart industry is going to get destroyed, but then now all of a sudden you have mechanics.
Yep.
And then now we've gone from, I remember when I was doing my diesel mechanic apprenticeship, there was this big shift in the early 2000s to electronic controlled engines and all of that type of stuff. And people were like, oh, electronics are going to take over. But now it's just a lot of mechanics are good at using computers and understanding the data that it spits out and everything like that.
That is probably the best analogy for it. That's it's a shift over time.
I think if you go back through and have a look at nature as well, there's common patterns. So there's all this whole thing about like animals going extinct. But again, you said about the media. The media do such a shit job of portraying the other side of it. An animal that doesn't adapt eventually becomes extinct because animals that can adapt are more adaptable. Like cats do a really good job of adapting to changing environments. Other animals don't do such a good job and they become extinct. I think it'll be the same with jobs. There'll be jobs that will become extinct because they can't adapt. There are people who will lose their jobs because they can't adapt. But if you're adaptable and you're open-minded and you can think and
the same goes with businesses. There will be businesses that will go bankrupt very quickly because they haven't, kept up with the times enough with this, enormous revolution.
Interesting. On the other side of that though, how often do you ever hear the media talking about all these new plants and all these new animals that are getting discovered and how many of them get discovered? I was having a conversation with someone a while ago and they were talking about the extinction and all this shit. And I said, how many varieties of roses do you reckon there were 200 years ago versus how many varieties now? Like walk into a local plant shop and there's fucking 200 different varieties of roses. That happened because new varieties were being created. But we talk about the extinction of certain things, not the transition and the change of...
Well, because the news want to push the sensational story that's going to get the most clicks, etc. So it's like... I don't watch the news very much because it's so biased against negativity and it's just everything is a doomsday thing on the news, right? Everything's like this is gonna, severely impact your life in a bad way and so is this and so is this. And when people are already doing it tough, most people are doing it tough at the moment financially, this just adds such stress to that excessively for no reason and just fogs people's view of, what the positives of these changes are, the positives of various things that are happening is just often missed and a lot of people just don't see it.
Question. So you're a very adaptable, intelligent human who sits here and goes, there's opportunities in everything and so on, and I don't watch the news. Do you think the fact that you don't watch the news is because the news is negative or because you don't look for shit that you don't want to invest in your own mentality? The reason why I asked, because I was talking to a client today and this guy's got a company that's doing 80+ million a year and he's a private client of mine. And we were talking about this and I said, you can look at things two ways because he said, when I go to the gym, I feel better. And I said, we can look at it that way or you can go to the gym because you feel better. So what I found is there's a huge shift in the way most people operate is that most people use external things to make themselves feel a certain way versus feeling a certain way, which is the reason why their external world is like that. What I found is the moment I realized that I was successful was the moment I felt successful. When I felt successful, then I became more successful externally. Whereas what most people do is they feel unsuccessful and they're always chasing success externally, but they never feel like it's there and they're always chasing it. And I think that if you chase a chicken, it always runs away and you're always chasing it. And so there are a lot of business owners who have $100, $200 million businesses and they come to me and they're like, I'm fucking miserable. My life shit. My wife just left or my husband just left, and they keep going through these crises. But it's because they're always chasing something externally that they think is going to make them feel a certain way. My philosophy over, 21 years of doing this now is you feel the thing and you just be the thing.
Yeah.
And then eventually the external world will reflect that. So I'm just wondering,
I think staying.
do you think that the news is there because the majority of people are just so fucking negative inside their own head and feel like shit and they're doomsday and they're already pre-wired for that. And then so now they look for it.
Yep. I think, you got to have a positive outlook on life and the future. If you're not excited about the future, then you're not going to have very much fun and you're going to get this negativity spiral. The negativity spiral is like on social media, there's like one negative post that comes up, you like it or you share it, whatever, and then Instagram gives you like 5 more of those. And it's just this spiral that just continues. And next thing you know, every time you go on Instagram, it's just doomsday, the world fucked up. It's just, and you just end up just constantly hating everything in the world because you're just in such a spiral of negativity. Whereas if you just kind of avoid that, you just remove that from your Instagram feed, you stay away from the news because it's mostly doesn't impact you at all and you don't need to know anything on the news really. You just ignore all of that and just focus on the positives, focus on the future, be excited about the future. Be confident and optimistic in where you're going, whether it's in your career or in your hobby or your sport or with your family or relationship, whatever it is. It all leads back to mindset. All of these things. That mindset was key at the start of a conversation, comes up again. It all leads back to just having a positive, optimistic mindset about what you're doing and about the future.
One of my clients says where focus goes, like there's a terminology, right? Where focus goes, energy flows. But he says where the focus goes, the river flows.
Yep.
And I just love that analogy, like where focus goes, the river flows. Like you can focus on all the shit.
Yep.
But what I do know as well is working with highly successful people, I learned this years ago, the best time to always make money is when everyone shits their pants and they're freaking out because the market's tanked.
Yep.
I literally wait for those moments. I think during COVID when the market tanked, that was where I made the most amount of money because I literally like rebounded.
Yep.
And I remember when the market tanked and the media's all over it and it's like the market's fucking crashing and all this shit. I was like, Jess, we're just putting all our chips in and we just chucked a whole bunch of cash in and 6 months later we're like, yeah.
That was very dangerous. That's when I started investing, was when the market crashed from COVID and I saw that and was like, I'm going to start investing. I wasn't 18, so I got my parents to make a stockbroking account. I invested under their name. And because every investment I made did so well, right, there was such optimism. I felt absolutely invincible. I kept making more and more investments and eventually that all comes crashing down. So that was very dangerous in my case.
Yeah.
But a smarter investor would have ended up very profitable off of that.
I did. But I learned that the hard way as well, is that you can't keep chasing. Like if it drops, it's going to rebound back to its average.
Yep.
So I just look at averages over long term.
Yep.
That's all I do.
Yep.
And when the market dumps well below the average, I'm like, game on. But when it starts going up above the average, I'm like, look, just dollar cost average over a period of time.
Yeah.
It'll be fine.
Going back to the thing on mindset.
Yeah.
One thing I notice about the successful business people that I speak to every now and then is they're all so optimistic. It's like if you ever literally one time I said the tiniest thing about something being difficult and they just like laughed it off and just pushed forwards, looked at me like I was an idiot for saying it, right? Just such optimism to just keep pushing forwards and just have such a positive mindset, because as soon as you start thinking that things are going wrong or things aren't working or you can't do it, it's just this endless spiral. So yeah, all the people that are highly successful that I've ever spoken to are just such optimists and just have such a positive mindset with everything they're doing.
I've also found as well, and you seem like this as well, where you see an opportunity in every situation. So there's an opportunity in a good situation. There's an opportunity in a bad situation. Mm-hmm. You just got to look for it. And so I know I've wired myself, and it took a long, long time to do this. And it's probably happened more over the last 6 to 12 months than ever before. It's just shit happens. Great. What's the opportunity? How do we grow out of this?
Yep.
Because you're either going to contract into something or you're going to expand out of it. And
Yep.
there's only really 2 choices.
Yep.
Nothing stays the same. So it's either growth or death, expansion or contraction. What are we doing?
Yep.
And
exactly.
I think that happens all the time, especially in business. When you got cash flow issues, it's like, well, you got to fucking grow out of it or expand out of it, because what are you going to do? Contract into it?
I mean, business is it really is the most difficult thing you can do. It's more difficult than engineering, trying to run a business, because just every single day, everything's going wrong, And if you even for a second have a mindset that it's not working out, or you can't do it or something, then you're just going to start spiraling. So it's just every situation, it's just like, all right, that happened. Oh, well, continue. The future's bright. Keep going. And just try and keep building up or keep moving forward, as I like to say.
Love it. I've got so many other questions, and I know we've got to start wrapping up in a minute. But what are some of the difficulties of putting stuff up into space, like those satellites that you put into space? What are some of the difficulties? Like these kids build them in school, then you go and launch them with SpaceX, or how do you get them up there?
Yeah, so we work with the students to give them documentation and advice and guidance to develop their payloads or their experiments. These might be doing communications, they might be looking at radiation, temperatures, whatever. Simultaneously, we're building the satellites. When those schools are finished, they send their experiments to us in the mail when we put it in the satellites. From there, we have to do all of the space testing to prove that it can go to space. Space is...
so you can't just throw shit up in space. Like
No.
I can't just pay SpaceX to just dump a bunch of stuff.
Very
like
much not that simple. You can have all the money in the world, but there's still a lot of requirements that you have to get past for insurance and for the United Nations and all different stuff.
So it's very heavily governed.
To an extent. Of course, there's some countries or people who ignore those rules. There's really no way to enforce a lot of the rules. But if you're doing things properly, you know, working with the Australian Space Agency and a reputable company like SpaceX, then yeah, it's not that simple. Firstly, to put something in a SpaceX rocket, there might be 100 satellites on that rocket, some worth over $100 million, all right? So we need to prove that our little tiny satellite, relative to theirs, is not going to hit their satellite and break their $100 million satellite. So we have to prove that it can survive the vibrations, which with 9 massive rocket engines is pretty damn extreme. We have to prove that it can survive the shock of the stages separating, as well as the temperature and the lack of pressure and stuff like that. All those environments are so extreme, and we have to test for every single one of those. So we have to go to the National Space Test Facility in Canberra, put our satellite through a bunch of equipment, and take a bunch of measurements and make sure it's okay and survives all of that before we launch. Then there's the paperwork side of it with regulatory, so we have to work with the space agency to get permits to launch to space, which is relatively simple, but it's a whole bunch of steps just to make sure that we know what we're doing and we're not reckless with what we're doing. And eventually, you can ship the satellite to SpaceX in either Florida or California, put it in the rocket, and launch it to space.
Wicked.
So it's a long process. Very difficult, but as with all difficult things, you know, the harder it is, the more exciting and rewarding it is when you finally achieve that. So a rocket launch is always very special for everyone who's managed to build a satellite that's on that launch.
If you had to give one piece of advice from everything that you've done to get to where you've got, what would it be?
Embrace failure.
Love it.
Just understand that it's part of the process. It's got to happen, whether you're in engineering, whether you're in business, whatever it is, just understands that the only way to grow and to learn and get to where you want to be or who you want to be is to just keep on failing.
I love that you said not just where you want to be, but who you want to be.
Yep.
I think that's more important than anything in life is
Yep.
becoming who you're born to be.
Yep, exactly.
Awesome. Where can people find you, or where can they find out more information?
Instagram at Robinson Makes. I'm pretty active. Otherwise, head to our website, robinson-aerospace.com. Bit of a long website name, but that has all the details about everything that we're doing as a company.
Awesome, mate. Thank you very much. Thanks for jumping on the podcast, and yeah, I look forward to hanging out.
Cool. Thank you.
Most people waste their life, and I just don't want you to be one of them.